Hello, 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 everybody. Good. Welcome this evening. This is the next one in our series of Careering Ahead, which is the career series from Women in Racing we've been bringing you over the last few months, talking about women with different careers within the racing industry. I'm Naomi Mellor. I'm a vet and I work for the BHA, as well as doing some podcasting and hosting as my second side hustle. So very pleased this evening to be welcoming Kat Bissett, who is the assistant trainer to Nikki Alexander. She is the latest one. I wanted to say a thank you at the beginning of this to Tallulah, who stepped in when I was poorly a couple of weeks ago to do the interview with Claudia McDougall, which is now on the YouTube channel if you want to go and have a look at that. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to be talking to Salika Varma, who is the clerk of the course at Aintree. She's another Scot, and she's doing amazing things in her career as well. So yeah, really pleased to be chatting to her before the Grand National meeting, and that's going to be super exciting. So do join us. That is the 17th of February, I think. So have a look. If you are on the website, there are links there where you can sign up, and all the Zoom links that you need to hook in will be there. We are live this evening. If you want to ask a question or you want to make a comment on anything, we love that. We love audience interaction. I will be monitoring the chat box, or you can use the Q&A function. If you look at the bottom of the screen, just hit the Q&A and you can just pop anything in there. They will flash up on my screen and I will monitor those. We'd love some questions for Kat. She's an amazing woman and we've got lots to talk about. We'll be here for kind of 45 minutes to an hour-ish, depending on how we go. So if you've got anything, then do just stick your questions in. But yes, as I said this evening, I am really delighted to be joined by Kat Bissett, who is assistant trainer to Nick Alexander in Scotland. So she's joining us from snowy Fife. And she won the Godolphin Stud and Stable Staff overall winner at the awards in 2019, as well as taking home the leadership award. So there's lots to chat to her about this evening. But I was going to kick off, Kat, just by asking you, I know that you didn't grow up in a horsey background, you grew up in Edinburgh. Can you just tell us a little bit about growing up and how you got into horses in the first place?
Yeah, so not at all from a horsey background. The only horsey background I had as a young child was riding in a riding school. My dad always had an interest in racing, which came purely from his brother. He left home and went to Newmarket to ride out, having not any experience himself either. So I sort of grew up through school going to Musselburgh Racecourse mainly, which is the local racecourse to Edinburgh, and that's how my interest in racing started. I always loved animals, and I did used to want to be a vet, but I couldn't really get the hand of higher maths. But yeah, so that's how I kind of got into racing, and I went to Mary Erskine's, and my first love was basketball, and I played a lot of basketball, and I used to spend my weekends playing 2 games of basketball and then riding out 2 lots and then playing another game of basketball. So it was quite hectic, juggling it all, and sort of racing came out tops purely because I loved animals the most. But I fell into it by chance, really, because my dad has always followed racing and loved horses as well. But he wanted to buy his own racehorse, which was a big dream of his since he was a young boy and whatnot. So we went to look at a horse at Lucinda Russell's, and she said, "Do you ride?" to me at the time, and I very naively said, "Yes, I do," not really quite realizing the difference. But she was very good to me when I was younger and sort of actually taught me how to ride racehorses, and I quickly realized that I didn't really know how to ride as well as I thought, but I sort of grew up doing that through school. Started when I was 15 and whatnot, and I loved it, and I've always really wanted to pursue it, but I went to university and tried to do other things, but it always came back to racing.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Because as someone who also started out riding horses in a riding school, and when I went to one of my first vet jobs and they were like, "Oh, so do you know how to handle a racehorse or ride a racehorse?" And I was like, yeah. And actually then when you're like, oh, this is different, and it's actually much harder, and handling a yearling colt or a 2-year-old colt is very different to handling a cob in a riding school, and actually there's a whole new set of skills to learn, aren't there?
Definitely. And the fantastic thing along sort of my journey in life is that I've met lots of people who have been really willing to teach and help and sort of develop people, and and basically being able to absorb everything they know from them has sort of done me in great stead. So I'm very lucky to have come across along the way. So I'm very grateful to them, basically.
Yeah, and Lucinda is an amazing advocate for bringing on young people, and particularly young women. I know she was involved with Nicola Curry when she was first starting out, and other people like that. You know, she's amazing at kind of nurturing people and sending them off on their careers. Were you riding out there before school in the mornings then, Catch, or just at weekends?
Just at weekends. I spent all my holidays there, and throughout university I kept going. I really liked going racing as well, and Lucinda was fantastic. It's my 16th birthday, I remember, all I wanted was my stable pass, which seems a bit odd now, but sort of take it for granted. But yeah, I got that on my 16th birthday, and yeah, so I did do it sort of as much as I possibly could. I remember sort of juggling exams at university, and I remember the Perth Festival was always on during my summer university exams, which was incredibly frustrating, and I probably could have done a bit better at university if I hadn't been juggling that quite so much.
So you went off to Glasgow to study history initially. What was it that kind of led you down that path, and how did you make your choice about kind of going to uni versus stepping straight into the workplace at that point, Catch?
Well, I really wanted to go to university because I think it's a really good life experience. And history and biology are my two favourite subjects at school. And I did actually start off at St Andrews, which was a bit of a false start. Went to university. I'm very young for my year at school, and I went to St Andrews, and I was there for 3 months. But so I was going there at 17, couldn't drive, and it just probably wasn't quite old enough for uni yet. And I actually went home and rode for a year at Lucinda's, and that sort of cemented the love for it even more, I suppose. And then Glasgow was a much better fit at the time, and history was basically my favourite subject. And it's a really good degree to do if you're not entirely sure what you want to do, because it just teaches you discipline and sort of forming your own opinions and whatnot. And I did love Glasgow University. The nightlife there is pretty good.
It's pretty good. Yeah. Had a few nights out in Glasgow. Love it. Yeah, that sounds super fun. But also, it's kind of just makes you realise that when you're that age, like I always think knowing what you want to do at that age is really difficult. And it's kind of being funneled down one career path or another. And like Marius is quite an academic school, and it's kind of making those decisions when you're that age. And I think about this when we talk a lot about careers with women in racing is, some people leave school at 15 or 16 and you go straight into the workplace, and some people go to university, and actually there's no like one way into the industry, is there? But did you kind of think about racing as a career at that point, or how was that on your radar or not?
I definitely did at school. I remember watching Lalonde win at the Cheltenham Festival when I was quite young at school, thinking, gosh, that's quite what I want to do, which is very strange because I actually ended up going to work for Richard Phillips further down the line, who was her trainer at the time. But, it was quite hard to make that decision at school because it's quite an academic school, obviously. I did well at school. I'm very fortunate, had very supportive teachers and whatnot. And it sort of seemed like the natural progression to go to university. I don't regret it at all. It was a very good life experience, met some of my bestest friends at university. But no one really said at the time, you can go into racing and you can make a really good career out of it. And it probably seemed at the time as a young person, maybe a bit of an unstable thing to do. Perhaps if I'd been more involved with racing, other than my small bubble, I might have realised that actually, no, I could really have made a go of it straight from the start. But don't regret the decision at all to go to uni. Loved it. I actually went and did a second degree. I loved it that much. But I did business psychology masters at Heriot Watt, which is actually something I still use a lot today. A lot of sort of coaching in the workplace and whatnot. I loved that as well. So I don't regret anything at all. And it sort of helped me develop as a person and make friends and whatnot. But as I say, I think good thing now is they're sort of racing to school, and a lot of people sort of working with school age people to actually say, no, you can really, really make a good career out of this. And if you've got passion for horses, then it's probably racing is definitely the best place to work. It's incredibly well regulated. There's a lot of educational facilities. You can really progress in racing, and I think it's fantastic that we are now getting more into the school level and making people more aware of it. And I really like to see it. I would have probably benefited that at my age as well back then.
It's interesting you say that, because I think it's kind of a natural thing for horsey girls, as it were, to think about eventing or dressage, or if you're not from a racing background, you're probably more likely to actually fall into one of the other disciplines in the horse world. And actually, it's a really interesting point that you've made, Cash, like, which I don't think we talk about enough, is that the regulation in racing, the structure, the educational facilities, none of that exists in any of those other worlds. And actually, it is very kind of, you know, having had friends who worked particularly in eventing, it is much more hit and miss. And like, you either make it or you don't. There's no kind of ladder or qualifications that you take in the way that you do it. You know, you can go to the racing schools or, you know, Northern Racing College or whatever. And those things just don't really exist. And I think you're so right that it's important for organizations like Racing to School and Careers in Racing are working hard in those fields. But yeah, it's amazing. And actually, I know you've talked before about kind of raising awareness in younger people about opportunities in racing, and I think that is really, really key. So how did you went onto the BHA graduate training program after you finished your masters? How did you stumble across that, or was that kind of, how did you get into that?
So it's very interesting you've got Sleek on next, because I've worked with Sleek at Lucinda Russell's.
Okay.
And so we rode out together, and she did a bit of the racing secretary stuff. And my dad helped her at the time. He was a bit involved with that at Lucinda's too. And she went on it, and she said, "You would love this." And it was, the interview process was very daunting. I remember thinking, there's no way I'm going to get on this and whatnot. But it was
so tell us about that
experience. Well, it was a bit like being on The Apprentice, to be honest. And you're sitting in a big room of people who are everyone really, really wants to get on the course, if you know what I mean. And I was there was people from really horsey backgrounds, really, you know, racing families. And I'm just thinking, I'm really out of place here. You know, I've got limited experience in Scotland, a little bit isolated and whatnot. And I sat with these people and talked about racing. It was fantastic. The whole day was great, because I've not really been immersed in a room of people like that before. But you know, there's the whole interview process. You're sat down in front of two people who are all very nice, but you know, I obviously wanted it a lot, so it was quite daunting. And when we remember sitting in the group, and you had to describe yourself in 3 words. And the man across from me said, "Comply or die," which was very apt at the time, being a quite famous resource. I thought, oh goodness, I haven't got no idea what we're going to say. But yeah, it was very like The Apprentice, but I loved it, and I didn't expect a phone call at all. I got a phone call from Sam Martin, who worked at the BHA at the time, saying, "Look, we want you on the course." When I was a bit shocked at the time, totally didn't expect it, and I was like, "That's fantastic." And they'd asked you what sort of placement you wanted. And I thought, it's again sort of harking back to maybe not knowing at the time how secure my career could be within racing in the area that I wanted to be. And I had said in the interview that I'd like to be in one of the clerk of the course placements. And Sam said to me, "Look, we've got placements there, but we really want you to go to Richard Phillips." And I didn't really know that had been a placement at the time. And he was the first racehorse trainer to take on a graduate. So I didn't really know. She was like, "No, I think you'll make it work, you'll enjoy it, and you're going to go and do a bit of marketing with him, talk about recruiting owners, marketing the yard and whatnot, and you'll be able to ride out, you'll be able to do that kind of thing." And to be honest, I was just delighted to get a spot on it, because I hadn't really expected it. So I was like, great, no problem. And then that was me. A few weeks later, you do 2 weeks at Newmarket, sort of intensive course. And it was the first time you're sitting in a lecture room thinking in your whole life, thinking, God, I love what these people are talking about, you know, without your mind wandering about what you might be doing that night and whatnot. So it was fantastic. The residential course, you go to the National Stud, went to St Mark Prescott's yard at 5:30 in the morning, saw the horses on the heath, and then you're off on your placement. So that's sort of like 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. I did 8 weeks with Richard, and best thing ever, really. fantastic boss, and he basically asked me to stay on from there, and I'm very grateful to him for doing it.
You obviously made quite the impression, but yeah, I love it when the graduates always come to the July Cup in Newmarket as well these days, and actually like just meeting them all, you meet people from such a breadth of background as well. And like last year they did their presentation, some of the ones that were doing presentations on welfare, and I sat in on a few of them, and the people in there were just, it was like, oh yeah, I'm from Liverpool and I'm from a bookmaking background, you know, my dad's a bookie, and it was like, I'm not from a horse background at all, or I've got an interest in like whatever, you know, the future of gaming and how that applies to sport. And it was just like, I was just really blown away by the kind of different people that you get on there as well. Did you meet some interesting people on the graduate training?
Yeah, some amazing people. We had a few people who went and did things at the tote, and then a few people that went into sort of time form and whatnot, and they could tell me the form of every horse that had run in the last 2 weeks.
Oh my God, I'm so rubbish at that.
Yeah. I just thought, wow, these people are very, very clever. But one of the people who I'm still friends with today is Ross Hamilton, who's works in the BHA, and he's obviously done fantastic things, and he was there at the awards night when I won, and he's Scottish too, so of course his way of congratulating me was to pass me a sly glass of wine while I was talking to him.
Amazing. And so Richard, I know you've spoken before about Richard was the sort of first and I think only racehorse trainer to take anyone on through the graduate program. What are your sort of views on that in terms of people from the graduate training going into yards catch now that you've kind of progressed into being an assistant trainer? Do you think that is a good way in, or do you think it's more, because there sort of isn't really a route in for assistants, I guess, you know, it's often a case of who you know, not what you know, and you know, opening doors is often done through a lot of networking and, you know, people helping each other out along the way. But do you think there is a place for a kind of more formal entry like that, perhaps through the graduate scheme or maybe another way?
Definitely, because without the graduate scheme, I probably wouldn't have, or certainly wouldn't be here at this age. It would have taken me a lot longer to get to where I am, because a lot of it's about experience and whatnot, and to get the jump. There's loads of people in racing who want to help you and they want to teach you and they want to bring you on, but if you're sort of from a slightly disconnected background, which perhaps I was, you know, living in Edinburgh, not really coming through the route that other people have, it definitely sort of jumped me into that, where else I might not have had the opportunity, if you know what I mean. And I definitely think that is something that people should look at, and I'm very, very grateful to be in that situation. I always think it's one of the key points in my life that really sort of gave me a massive leg up. So yeah, I definitely think you're right in that it is quite hard. There is a finite amount of assistant trainer positions as well. So there's also, I think that's basically one of the things that we need to look at in racing is sort of progression and how we progress up the ladder, if you know what I mean, because it's a very much a pyramid structure, and to make sure that people can feel like they're progressing from entry level on a yard basis right up to the top, because you know there's only 1, 2, maybe 3, depending on how big yards you are on, that can be an assistant trainer. So how do people progress and feel valuable and feel like they are sort of furthering their careers? I think that's one thing that we should address, but I know that a lot of the racing schools are doing lots of basic research and whatnot of how they might formalize that. So I know it is being looked into, but I definitely think we could do a bit more to sort of help that.
And what do you think of have you guys come up with, you know, either in Nikki's or anywhere else that you've worked, kind of thinking of creative solutions for that kind of thing? Because it's a tough problem. Like, that's a tough nut to crack, because like you say, when it's a pyramid structure and you've got a lot of people at the bottom, you know, you see in corporate companies, like my brother works for a big corporate, there is a very fixed kind of ladder that you climb, I guess, but they don't seem to exist so much either in yards or perhaps even in other areas of racing as well. You know, that thing of progression that you were talking about, because a lot of people who are ambitious have to be feeling like they are going to progress in order to stay somewhere. Have you guys kind of put anything into practice, or have you had ideas yourself on how you think that would work?
At Nix we have a slightly more rectangle structure. In that, the whole yard split into barns. I know there's a few yards that do this too, so we're not unique. I don't want to make it sound like we're the only people that do this. And within the barns, the staff have like barn managers and assistant barn managers. And basically, when you're sort of made a barn manager, you're a mini assistant trainer, and it's encouraging people to sort of take ownership of the horses that live in their barn and the area of the barn itself, whether it's sort of suggesting modifications for ventilation in the barn, how they might structure something differently, putting new drains in, things like that, to actually the health care of the horse. And then we go into sort of try and discuss why we're exercising them in a certain way, why we're using a certain gallop with a certain horse. And then moving on to sort of race planning, we produce massive race planning sheet and sort of each horse's next targets highlighted, and sort of formalizing it in that they can see what we're trying to do with each horse, but also discussing it as well, because I think communication is the most important thing about feeling valued in your job, and to feel like someone actually values and cares about your opinion and take time to sort of discuss it and make you feel involved, because you are involved. And the thing is with horses, everyone's opinion is valid, because the people who are working in those barns actually probably see more of the horse in a day than I do, and even more so Nick does, because we are sort of maybe dealing with an owner or dealing with a vet or whatnot, and everyone's sort of little things that they observe and whatnot are very, very important, because these little things can manifest into big things, and it can be the key thing that might, you know, small margins gain big lengths on the race course. It's kind of how we like to put it to everyone. So I think there's lots of different things you can do to progress. We also work a lot with the staff about discussing about what courses they'd like to do. There's lots of developmental courses. It's not just foundation courses like level 1, 2, 3. There's work rider courses now at the racing school, which is sort of working on your riding at a higher level. And then things like clipping, lunging. And every year we sort of take time at the start of the year and at the end of the year to have sort of formal appraisals, set goals, and then you know, at the end of the year we're taking these things off and say, right, what's next and whatnot. And I think all of that's really important, because it's quite a hard job to do day in, day out, especially when it's sleeting like it is outside. So you have to feel that, you know, you're doing it for your own personal gain, as well as sort of the gain of the team and whatnot. So we do our best. I hope everyone's happy.
But it sounds an amazing place to work. Like, having worked in, you know, because as a vet in practice, I was going in and out of a lot of yards, and actually just the things you're talking about they're not commonly done. And, you know, actually to be doing an appraisal with every member of staff twice a year is absolutely incredible. And, you know, that kind of empowering people within your yard, you know, as barn leaders and kind of mini assistants, as you refer to them, to themselves take responsibility is a really phenomenal thing to be doing. How much of that was Nick doing before you got there, Catch, or how much involvement have you had in kind of developing those systems?
Nick's always had formal appraisals with the staff, but we moved it to twice a year, because if you don't sort of track how you've progressed from the first, if it's always sort of at the start of the season, then you never really feel like someone actually genuinely cares about how many of your goals you've achieved and whatnot, maybe what went wrong along the way. So we moved it to 2. I think I do quite a lot of work with the staff, and that's sort of where my passion is. I love horses, but I love working with people who like working with horses, if you know what I mean. Like-minded people, because I love seeing people coming into racing having not been involved with it before, because that's like me. And we've got lots of people who started next who maybe have a bit of horse experience but have no idea about racing, and to actually communicate with them and teach them, you know, this is what the handicap system is, this is why we're running that in this race, and then all of a sudden they actually enjoy watching racing. It's not just about, oh, when I came to Kynaston, I just watched the Grand National, but I didn't really watch anything else. So seeing people develop's what I love doing, basically. So try and take time out and speak to people, and when you're going around the horse's legs and whatnot, because to be honest, if you take time to speak to the people, it makes my life a hell of a lot easier, because they're doing most of the work for me, and they're communicating it back and whatnot. And I think that's the most satisfying part of the job for me, really.
Definitely. And also, I guess, the reality is, when you are in a place like Kynaston, you are away from the hubs and the racing centres, and it just it is less easy, isn't it, to recruit people in a place where you are a bit more out on a limb. And particularly when you're quite so far north, it's not as natural as if you're in Newmarket, someone leaves one yard, they walk 50 yards down the road and they go into another one. Like, you're having to kind of actively work to attract people and to retain them. And I think building the kind of systems that you guys have, and the ethos that you clearly have, both personally and as part of the business as a whole, is only going to be good for actually attracting talent in the local area. And you're giving back to your own local economy by employing people and developing them as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it certainly does work, because been asked to do a few things recently, and talking about staffing crisis and whatnot. I feel a little bit embarrassed when I'm asked to do that, because we actually usually find that we're a bit overstaffed. We've got a really good staff retention. We're really lucky, got a fantastic, very committed team, and a lot of people have now been there for a long time and whatnot. And I think that's really testament to Nick and whatnot, and just looking after people. And that's how you keep people, make people feel valued. It's not all about money. You should be the end of praise, because it's very valuable as well, if you know what I mean. It's about looking after people too.
Definitely. And just winding back to just talking about Richard, so you went there and he asked you to stay on. How did your kind of career develop with him initially? From doing a bit of marketing was how you started. How did you kind of get into growing into having experience with things like you say Nikki's going around checking the legs, like those things take a lot of skill, they take a lot of practice of learning. How did you kind of develop those skills and reach a point where you were confident to apply for an assistant trainer job?
Well, so I was at Richard's for 4 years, just over 4 years, and he was fantastic, because he everything at me. He taught me everything. He supervised me all the time, but he let me make mistakes. He let me put forward my opinion and whatnot. He's really good. And the other really good thing about working at Richard's is that it's a bit of a hub in the Cotswolds, and lots of people drop in and whatnot. And I met a lot of people who taught me different things and shared their experiences with me, took me to do different things. So very lucky in who I was able to work with at the time when I was there. But basically, it sort of progressed from just the marketing thing, because I just asked to do more and said, oh, can I do this? And I started writing out, you share your opinion, and then he's like, well, what do you think about that? And then it did develop naturally in a way as well. But it's I remember towards the end of it was like the 6th week or something like that, he was struggling to get to the races and to saddle a horse at Worcestershire. And I just said, well, I can saddle a racehorse, which at that time I had travelled a lot further than down whatnot. I could confidently do that. And then he was like, right, off you go, speak to the owners, do this, tell, I think it was Jack Sherwood was riding the horse, and he was like, tell Jack to do this. Well, and just threw me at the deep end. And it was very funny, because he wasn't afraid to throw me in the deep end, because I saddled this horse, no problems, and went to put the blinkers on. And she reared up and went absolutely ballistic. And of course, didn't tell me that she was going to do this. But I phoned him and I was like, yeah, everything fine, gave my feedback. And told him she was a bit tricky to put the blinkers on, though, boss. And he's like, oh yeah, she's always like that. But he was like, I thought you'd manage.
Could have done with a bit of warning.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it definitely, to work for someone that will sort of put that trust in you and let you take on these things was very valuable to me. Very grateful to him. He was very hard on me too. I don't, if he plays this back or something, I don't want him to think that he wouldn't like if it was all fluffy and roses. He'd want to know that straight down the line sometimes.
But at the same time, I think, it's very hard, you know, because throwing yourself in at the deep end is quite a difficult thing to do. And actually, if you're a person of great confidence, I always think that, you know, when I started out in my career, there's a difference between being confident and arrogant. And actually, if you're overly confident and you put yourself forward for things you're not capable of, you just end up screwing up and making yourself look like an idiot and letting down other people by extension. But actually, if you don't put yourself forward for things and you're not confident to stick your hand up and say, I'll do that, you're not going anywhere. And actually, I think it's a real, particularly for young women starting in their careers, and other people may disagree with this, but I generally find boys are just a bit more like, yeah, I'll throw my hand in and like, I'll do that. And actually, like, having the confidence to kind of just say, yes, I can saddle a racehorse, which you clearly can, then some people just wouldn't be confident enough to do that. And actually having those skills and that personality, and, you know, is great. And I think it's a key thing to kind of encourage young women to be confident enough to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't actually say, I wouldn't call myself a confident person either.
Oh my God, me neither. Yeah.
So, you know, just because I did it doesn't mean I wasn't always a bit unsure about what I was doing. I was always confident. I wouldn't like to put myself in a situation where I wasn't confident about my skill set being capable of doing it, because I don't think you do anyone any favors then. But I think if you say, right, I'm very happy to do this, but I wouldn't be sure about this part, what would you do? How would you do this? And I think if you're sort of confident enough to communicate the parts that you're not confident about, then you're actually doing yourself a bigger favor. You know, put your hand up and do it, but say, yeah, but I'm not sure about this. What do you think? And I think having the confidence to do that's the most valuable part. I remember Warren Marson always said to me he was the bravest jockey in the weighing room because he was scared, but he did it anyway. And I thought, oh, it always lived with me, because I wouldn't say I was very confident or always the bravest, but I think if you're sort of a wee bit nervous, but you do it anyway, that's actually when you're very brave.
I think a bit of nerves is good. And actually, like, anyone who says they don't feel nerves ever is a liar. But actually, I just, that thing of feel the fear and do it anyway I think is kind of good for life, as long as you're not doing anything totally stupid, obviously. But you know, it's kind of good advice, I think, is acknowledge that, yeah, that's a bit scary, or I've got a bit of a flutter, or they've got those butterflies, or whatever it is. And actually then, like, just stepping into that and saying, I know I can do this, even if I'm only kind of 70% of the way there, or whatever it is, like, is a great way to be. So you've been at Nick's for kind of 5 or 6 years now, have you, Cash?
Yeah, 5 years, 5 and a bit years.
5 years. And how did you end up heading back up? Presumably you wanted to head home, did you? Is that always the plan, was to head back up north?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, you know, my family's here. My brothers were both starting to have children and whatnot, so there was a little bit of a sort of pine for home. But I always say that Cotswolds was my second home. I miss it dreadfully because I've got my racing family down there and my real family up here. But the
weather's much nicer in the Cotswolds as well.
I do miss that. But as I say, my sort of family was starting to extend, and my dad actually met Nick at the races one day, and you know, Scottish racing is quite a small community and whatnot, and Nick sort of just asked after me, and he's always at Richard. She's now Richard's assistant. She did this, and Nick sort of said, oh, Nick hadn't ever had an assistant before, and he said, oh, I'm thinking about an assistant position at Kynaston. If she would be at all interested, tell her to just give me a call. So I did give him a call, and I ended up just coming up and chatting to him, and it just sort of all fitted into place at the right time. So I was very lucky that just came up when it did. But it was hard to leave, and I do still miss it a lot. It is different up here because, as you say, it's a little bit more isolated in terms of the you're not in one of the racing centres and whatnot. But Scottish racing is a sort of centre in itself. It's very, very close knit. Everyone's very fond of each other and helpful. You know, the stable staff and whatnot look out for each other and help each other and whatnot. It's just that the geography is a little bit harder to overcome.
So talk to us a little bit about the kind of joy of Scottish racing, because I think, you know, I've I said to you before we started, like I went to university in Scotland, a lot of our friends live there. We've, you know, I would go racing at Musselburgh and Perth occasionally and really enjoy it. What do you think are the kind of draws of Scottish racing? Apart, you know, it's a small community, it's tight knit. I think it's a very friendly place to go racing, I have to say. What are the kind of draws for you, Cash, about that community in its own right? And are you confident and hopeful about the sort of future of Scottish racing? Because there was a bit of a time when it felt like Scottish racing was a bit in the doldrums, you know?
Definitely. I think Scottish racing has the quality of racehorses in the north in the recent years has obviously improved massively, which is you know, due to the support of owners and whatnot. So you have to be a bit grateful to them, well, very grateful to them. But they, you know, Scottish racing's always had this sort of community feeling, as we've been saying. But it's just, we're all friends really, but we're rivals as well. Don't get me wrong, you do like to beat them, but everyone is, you know, if you have a problem or whatnot, when I introduce people, young staff, and I say, this is Jamie Duff. She's Lucinda's travelling head person. If you're ever stuck or you don't know what to do and I'm not here, ask Jamie, she'll help you. And that kind of thing is fantastic. But it is friendly. The race courses, a lot of money has been spent in the race courses. They're fantastic. The way that they cater for the owners is brilliant. Musselburgh Racecourse in particular has come on. Perth is amazing, you know, in terms of prize money, just the effort that everyone's done to really raise the level. And, you know, we've won a Grand National in from Scotland and won an Ebor, and, you know, Lakeview lads, obviously personal favourite of mine. But it is fantastic, just the quality of what was coming through. And I think basically the workforce has really improved as well. And it's a much more, because of the money and effort that people have put in, it is a more attractive place to come and work. And there's the creation of the Scottish Racing Academy that's, you know, a racing school that's catered for Scotland and the north, that's come through. And it's just testament to the fact that people really are improving things in the north. And I'm very happy to be here. Long may it continue.
Definitely, yeah. And I think Perth is one of my favorite places to go racing, just because it's so beautiful. You know, you just don't go to race courses with that kind of atmosphere and the kind of ambience around there and stuff is just amazing. I love it. And I think, you know, you get people like Gordon Elliott sending a lot of horses to Perth, and, you know, it's an attraction to Irish trainers as well. And, you know, I know like a lot of the Irish trainers send horses over there as well. And yeah, it's great. And so just winding back a little bit, you mentioned in passing before that your business psychology masters was really useful in your kind of management and leadership. Do you want to tell us a little bit about where your interest in the kind of man management came from, and what you learned in that degree that you've put into practice, you know, looking after people in the workplace?
Yeah, so a lot of that was it was broken down into different fragments and whatnot, and it was, a lot of it was very useful. The most important thing I think I did was a huge chunk of the course is about coaching, like coaching people for business. So helping staff set goals, helping them achieve goals, and sort of basically that's the side that I really like and I'd like to put into practice that will work with the staff. Other things like designing your people's jobs and people's roles to make the job as easy as possible, streamline things, make people, you know, create a job where it's very hard to make mistakes, you know, make everything clear. And that was very interesting to me as well. And Nick and I talk a lot about how, you know, creating an ethos and a culture, which is another part of it, that I mean, you know, creating a business culture which is healthy and inclusive to make people feel valued and want to do well. And I think, you know, everyone comes to work generally wanting to do their best if they're in a role where they feel valued and that what they do is important. So if you can create people's jobs to feel like that, then it's beneficial to, it's no brainer, it's beneficial to your business, if you know what I mean. So just putting stuff like that into practice, I think it's been really interesting for me, and I did really enjoy that that degree at Harriet Watt. Was really nice. It was only 6 people on the course. It was the first time that they ran it. They like created the course, and it was the first year they ran it. So it was 1-to-1 and whatnot, and I was able to do a lot of my work as if with racing in mind, and it was really quite interesting, and taking some of that and put it into practice, which is quite good. Not use the history degree quite so much, but you know.
Slightly less practical. But yeah, no, it's amazing. And actually, I think that thing about creating the culture is something I find really interesting. And just talking along those lines, you know, a lot of people will be aware that Women in Racing have been doing some work about working mothers, and, you know, creating that kind of atmosphere and vibe where people can have flexible working. It's you know, you said that you've been involved with looking after or looking into the kind of staffing crisis, which I know you guys are fortunate, you've got a great workforce, but obviously elsewhere in the country it's difficult. Have you kind of employed funky flexible working schedules? Like, how do you go about looking after your staff in that way? Because I always think, and I talk about this quite a lot with people, is, you know, in the major racing centres particularly, the hours at which we exercise racehorses are not conducive to people picking up their children or dropping them off at school. It's ridiculous, you know.
Not at all. Yeah, no, one of the best things that we did, I think we started it 2 years ago now, was to go to a 5-day working week. So every member of staff gets 2 full days off a week, and I think that is one of the most beneficial things that we've done for the workforce, because I think even myself, you know, I love my job, I look forward to going to work, but you know, everyone has to have a life that they can live outside their job, and racing is unique in that you do take a lot of it home, and you know, you'll get home late from racing or whatnot, but you do have to provide time for people to do their own thing, and then you come back to work feeling better and more refreshed. And I think a lot of yards are now moving towards sort of that level as well, but for a long time it was sort of, you know, a day and a half every 2 weeks or whatnot, and that's just not, it's not sustainable, especially when you get to sort of age where you're looking to have a family or whatnot. To do that it's not really good for anyone. I don't think it's good for your sort of mental health to have a day off and then know that you've got a full working week, long hours, wet weather, and it's so quite, the next day off is quite so far away.
Yeah.
And I think everyone at work's really benefit from that. I know certainly I have.
But also I think it's a very physical job as well, and actually, like, you know, it's no wonder people leave. You know, you talk about the burnout, the long hours, you know, still being at the races, you know, chatting to the traveling staff, that I spent a lot of time hanging out with the stable staff, and you know, those conversations about, oh, tonight I'm going to get home at midnight and I'll be on the yard at 6 or 5 or whatever it happens to be, and you know, it's demanding physically and mentally, and actually I think looking after staff is so important. And you know, it's definitely one of the reasons that yards like yours are able to retain good staff, is because you're looking after them really well. We've had some questions coming in. If anyone else would like to pop your questions in. First one is, how many staff are you responsible for at Nix?
We've got 18 full-time members of staff, and we've got about 3 people that come in just purely to ride out, one of which is someone who's, I won't tell you how old she is, but she did first start riding out for Nick's father.
Wow.
So quite a long time ago.
She must be in good shape.
She's in very, very good shape, and she's absolutely super. She works 3 days a week, and she's a breath of fresh air when she comes in.
Amazing.
And I think that's fantastic to have someone that's worked in racing for that long and still comes in every day bouncing, and
who's still got their own hips. And next one, what are your aspirations, and would you like to progress to being a trainer in your own right?
Yes, that's the plan. So I've done my first trainer's module, and I was just going to do my second one, but coronavirus has obviously put stops to that. But I live on the next door farm to Nick, so I've got a couple of horses that I've had in pre-training before they go into training with Nick and whatnot, of my father's. So I'm very lucky that I get to do that. I'm very blessed, so I know that. But yeah, that's the plan. I just working and juggling that is quite difficult, and having 2 days off a week certainly helps. But we're getting there.
Well, we'll look forward to when you're up and running as a trainer. You'll be joining the increasing ranks of young women going into training, which is ever burgeoning, and as it rightly should be. So the other thing, I was just going to chat to you before, we've got a few more minutes, guys. So do you, if anyone else has any more questions, do you just pop them in? Oh, here's a good one. This is a great question. What race would you most like to win as a trainer?
Champion Chase. Because it's, everyone says the Gold Cup or the Grand National, but the Champion Chase is the most thrilling, I think, because it's fast paced, and some of my favourite horses over the years have been Champion Chase winners. So yeah, that.
Straight in there with that one. She was right on. My favourite's the Tingle Creek, actually. So same thing, like I love that, them going down the railway fences in the back straight. It's amazing. And a couple of years ago, let's just chat briefly about the Godolphin Southern Stable Staff Awards. It was a big moment in your career. It was really lovely. Just tell us a little bit about that experience and being nominated, and what it meant to you to win that.
Well, it was amazing, and I always feel a little bit embarrassed by it, to be honest, because every year we nominate someone in the yard. We've got lots of staff, and you could nominate most of them, all of them really, because they're all so hardworking. But we try and nominate someone every year at Nick's.
That's amazing in its own right, though, because like it means that somebody every year is getting the kind of honour of a nomination, which is great for morale.
Yeah, definitely. And I just think to be nominated is fantastic, and well, basically the story goes, so all right, Nick, it's nomination time. What do you think this year? And then this, and it actually, I think I'm going to nominate you. I'm like, oh, okay. So sort of left it to him that year, and didn't really think anything of it until I got into the top 10, and I was like, well, that's unexpected, but we'll take that anyway. And to get in, you get down to this top 3, and I was looking at the people who I was up against, and I was thinking, I've got absolutely no chance. John Gosden's assistant trainer, Jamie Duff, who's a really close personal friend of mine, one of my best friends, Lucinda Russell's a traveling head girl and assistant trainer. She was in the dedication category, and I just thinking, I knew so many people in the lineup, and people that I look up to and respect, and I know how hard they work and whatnot. I just thought, wow, this is amazing to get this far. I'm very proud. And then I actually took Richard and Jolene as my guests. So you get to take guests with you, and Jolene's Richard's racing secretary. So sort of my racing family, if you know what I mean. She's like my racing big sister. She taught me a lot about the racing secretary stuff, which is do a lot of that at Nick's as well. And I remember thinking, wow, I don't know how I got this far, but when they read my name out, I just couldn't really believe it. So I'm very, very honoured, and as the first time Richard Phillips told me he was proud of me, so I think that was one of the biggest achievements of the time.
Yeah, well, it's kudos. That is the kudos that you need in your life. I mean, it looks like a lovely evening. You've got Gacy's kind of big black tie, but
amazing.
Actually, that it's such a prestigious thing at the Southern Stable Staff Awards, but rightly so. And I know sort of industry wide recognised as being an amazing endeavour, and Godolphin have done a fantastic job supporting that as well. Next question come in. What horse from the past and from the present would Catch most like to train?
Oh, from the past, Moscow Flyer, probably.
Ooh, okay.
I'm showing my age a little bit, actually. It's a bit embarrassing.
Don't worry, love. You're about the same age as me. It's fine.
And present, I'm going to have to say Lakeview Lad, because he's a very close friend of mine just now.
Excellent. Good. Is he in good form?
He's in very good form. Disappointed that Cheltenham was off, but he's in great form.
Good. Yeah. The stupid weather, isn't it? It's awful at the moment. I feel like everything's just conspiring against everybody right now. So never mind. Onwards and upwards. We'll head towards the festival. Cool. Well, I think we're just about done. Catch, thank you so much for your
Not
time.
at all.
Hopefully see you
Thank
at
you for
Tottenham
having
or
me.
somewhere in the upcoming future when we can
Fingers
all see one
crossed.
another again. And anybody else, if you have any more questions or you're watching this back, this is going to be put up on YouTube in the next few days. Catch is a mentor for women in racing, and are you available at the moment? I think
I am available at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, she's been recruited into our mentoring program. So if you'd like to get in touch with her, do just drop us a line. We're on all the socials. They are at Kynaston for Nick Alexander's yard. Lots of lovely stuff there. I had a quick squiz on your Instagram this morning. There's lots of wonderful things happening. So do make contact, follow Catch, see what she's up to. You can find details of our next interview with Salika, as I said, in a few weeks' time. But yeah, Catch, thank you so much. This has been such a fun chat. And yeah, really lovely to meet you. And anyone who would like to add any extra questions, if you want to send them in, we will endeavour to get them answered if you have anything burning to ask Catch. Cool. Well, thanks ever so much and have a good evening, everybody. Hi.